In today's video, I'll guide you through creating a dynamic price range slider, a vital component extensively used in e-commerce platforms to filter products based on price. Here are the features we'll explore. Update price using input range sliders. In this demo, when I click and drag the min or max price across the slider, the respective number inputs dynamically change. Update price using number inputs. When manually changing the number inputs, the range slider reflects the changes. Drag range slider to fine-tune the price range. The selected range can be dragged and move across the slider. Before we start, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. It truly helps the channel grow. Now, let's dive into the code. To start, I'll create a div with the class of range slider. Inside it, I'll add number inputs for min and max price. Next to it, I will add a div with the class of range. Afterwards, I'll duplicate the number inputs and move them inside the range div. Last but not least, I'll change the type and class names of these inputs. So that's the HTML part for now. I'll go to the CSS and start styling the page. I'll make this quick so we can move on to the relevant styles. Now on the range slider, I'll make it display flex. Then I'll set the flex wrap to wrap. Then justify the content to space between. This is what will allow us to put the number inputs on opposite ends of the slider. Next, I'll make the range div width 100%. With flex wrap, this will move to the next line. Then on the number inputs, I'll apply the following styles. Back to the range div. I'll make it display grid and position relative. Then for the inputs inside it, I'll set the grid row and column to align them on top of each other. But because the inputs are overlapping, I'm unable to change the input that's underneath. So I'll set the pointer events to none. And only allow the pointer events on the thumb. Now, I'm able to change the value of both inputs. Next, I don't need this default UI, so I will change the appearance to none. I want to customize the thumb, so I'll set the appearance to none as well. Now for the slider, I'm not going to use the input for this. Instead, I'll go back to the HTML and add a new element to act as the slider. Back to the style sheet, I'll set the position of the slider to absolute. Next, I'll set the size and background color. Then center it vertically with top and transform properties. Here, I'm unable to select the thumbs because the slider is above it. So, I'll set the z-index to -1 to push it behind. This will make the slider disappear, but we can fix it by setting the parent element to a higher z-index. With that, the thumbs are selectable. Lastly, for the progress div, I'll add the following styles. I'll remove the width here since it will be dynamically changed in JavaScript. That's all the CSS for the most part. Now, let's move on to implementing the first feature in JavaScript. To start, I'll select all the relevant elements. Next, I'll add an event listeners to the range inputs. Here, when I move the min thumb, it shouldn't surpass the max thumb. The same restriction should apply the other way around. So, inside the event listeners, I'll add a condition to apply the restriction. Now, when the thumbs overlap, they both adjust to stay within the limits. Next, I need to display the selected range using the progress div. To do that, I'll add a function and name it update progress. Next, I'll define the selected min and max values. Afterwards, I need to determine the range of the slider and the selected values. With that, we can calculate the width of the selected range. Next, I'll call this function inside the event listeners and also outside for when the page is loaded. The resulting width for the selected range is right, but the position is off. To fix that, I'll go back to the update progress function and calculate the offset. Now we get the selected range in the right position. Next, when I move the min and max thumb, I want the number inputs to also update. So inside the same function, I'll update those fields as well. That's all for updating the min and max price with range sliders. Moving on to the next feature, the first thing to do is add event listeners to the number inputs. I'll name the event handler as update range. Inside the update range function, I'll get the number inputs values. Then assign the values to the respective range inputs. Now, as I update the number input, the thumbs also updates. To sync the selected range, I'll call the update progress function. Here, the min price exceeded the max price, and vice versa. To fix that, I'll add a condition inside the update range function. Now, the number inputs are no longer exceeding the respective min and max values. That wraps up the second feature. The last feature is more like a bonus. Here, when I hover the selected range, the cursor is the default. I will change it to a cursor that indicates the range is draggable. Then, I'll add 3 event listeners to handle different interactions with the range slider. The first listener will detect clicks on the selected range and initiate the dragging process. The second listener will track mouse movements across the document while the range is being dragged. The third listener will detect when the mouse is released after dragging the range. Here, the mouse move event is executing, even before I click on the selected range. To prevent that, I will add a variable to track when I'm dragging or not. When I click on the selected range, I will set it to true. Then on mouse move event, I will execute a block of code when this flag is true. Lastly, on mouse up event, I will set this variable to false to indicate the dragging has ended. Now, if I move the mouse on the document, the mouse move event listener is no longer executed unless I click on the selected range first. That said, there's a small issue here when I'm dragging the mouse. When the mouse moves away from the selected range, the cursor reverts to the default even if I'm still dragging. Also, if I drag over a text, the text is highlighted by default. To address the latter issue, I will prevent the default behavior in the mouse down event. As for the cursor, I will add a dragging class on the parent element. This will allow me to set the cursor outside the selected range. Now, the cursor and text highlight issue is fixed. I will remove all the console log statements and proceed with the dragging logic. First, I need to get the initial position of the cursor relative to the selected range. To do that, I will use the method getBoundingClientRect on the selected range. This method will give me the size and position of the element. Now, inside the mouse move event listener, I will retrieve the size and position of the slider element. Then, I will calculate the new left position relative to the slider's width. As you can see, the selected range follows the mouse as I dragged it. To prevent it from going beyond the slider width, I will make some adjustments. First, I will make sure the new left position doesn't go below 0. Next, I'll get the width of the selected range. With that, I'll make sure the new left position doesn't go over the width of the slider. Next is to sync the thumbs with the movement of the selected range. Now, the selected range can be dragged across the slider. With that, the last feature has been fully implemented. That's all for today's video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to like and share this video. Also, subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching.